Welcome to another The Builders Extra, where we dive into a past episode. And this episode today is episode 69, which is the last one we published with Danielle Zarcaro. So in this episode, we talked a lot about WordPress because we're both web developers, so it's kind of natural. But we naturally gravitate to that. But one of the things we talked about was the flexibility of WordPress and how all the different ways that WordPress is used and built, right? And it's always fascinated me because seeing the evolution, like just watching how WordPress has progressed over the decades. And I've been using WordPress since around 2004-ish, 5-ish. And I used it to build a lot of stuff back in those days that it wasn't meant to be used to do. But over time, that's been the beautiful thing about WordPress. Even though it maybe out of the box, it doesn't do what you want it to do, you can kind of make it do whatever you want it to do if you work hard enough at it. But it's actually gotten easier over time, especially now with the advent of what's called Headless Cms, which is basically you use the back end of WordPress and the front end can be anything. React, using Gatsby, Angular, whatever you want it to be, right, on the front end. So that's been an interesting addition in recent years. But also, a lot of developers will have their different ways of wanting to do things, wanting to build sites themselves or whatever. Businesses too. They like it a specific way. And sometimes that specific way is more a legacy way. We don't want to deal with blocks at all, or maybe just a little bit. It might be we want to go all in on where WordPress is headed and do things the Gutenberg way and full site editing and all that. Or you might want to stick to one of the common page builders out there like Divi or others. Elementor is a big. I have Elementor sites all over the place. I didn't build initially, but I've inherited. So I had to get used to that. And that was kind of something I learned. And this is a good lesson. Well, this is the way I look at it, or whether it's you can onboard it as a lesson if you want to or not, or you can disagree with me. But I don't think there's necessarily a right way to build WordPress. I see WordPress as just a framework. What is the right way, though, is based on what type of business, what type of website you're building and the goals of that website. That's where we got into conversation about audits. She's doing audits now for websites. And that's something we do here as well at Unified Web Design, where I don't do audits necessarily on every site that every project, depends on the type of project, but especially maintenance stuff, I'll do an audit of the site. And that initial audit is really logging into the WordPress admin, looking around. Maybe if I can get into the code, I'll look at the code, depending on the complexity and what I see there. How deep I have to go. But there's another component to that. It's also understanding the goals of the business, and are they high growth? Are they growing tremendously? Are they do they get a lot of traffic? Do they get spikes in traffic? Do they have a lot of users? Do they get a lot of transactions? But what's going on there, right? So you need to understand the business side of it as well, and you take all of those things together. And you decide the best way to build the site. And beyond just building a site, how you're going to manage that site, and if you're going to have, what your workflow is to update the site and all that stuff, we have to figure out. But ultimately, it comes down to what's best for that business. And it could be the people at the business. Maybe they're used to Elementor, and okay, fine, we'll use Elementor. Or they kind of want what we want. We want to build a lightweight, custom site from the ground up, only what we need. And they go that route. Maybe they can accommodate that, or, so there's so many different ways it could go. But again, it's not necessarily, Elementor using page builder is bad, or doing a full site editing site today is bad, or, or just keeping everything classic and legacy is bad. if the client is happy, if the business is happy, and that's what they want, that's what they're used to, that's what they want, then great, go for it. That's what you do, right? Generally speaking, all those sites are going to perform very well, but at the same time, performance is part of this too, right? So yeah, I mean, certain types of sites built a certain way is going to be faster or better in far as performance is concerned. So yeah, so all those things have to be considered. But it's interesting, right? And it's an interesting place we find ourselves. I think it's beneficial for everybody, and it's really great from a developer perspective and from an agency perspective, because we can build our own toolkits and our own way of building things out of the box and offer that as well. And then we, hopefully, clients will find the clients that liked things built that way. One of the last things I'll just say here is a point I made on the podcast as well, or on that podcast as well. Yeah. Is that eventually the way WordPress is headed now, right? With full site editing, now they just launched WordPress 6.0 and all these new bells and whistles and improving how blocks work and all that stuff. Now we're here. Now understand that a lot of people are still on the old stuff, on the old legacy classic way of doing things. But over the coming years, more and more people, as they get new websites or they try new themes, eventually all the themes are going to start to be block themes. So it's going to become more and more difficult to sell somebody on having a classic way of doing things when they might come back and say, well, what about blocks? I want to easily update my content everywhere. I want to use this block plug, this particular block, or I love this block plugin, and you're going to build it just using a classic editor. So people are going to change and have different expectations over the coming years. And so it's important to not only be able to, from my perspective, especially as an agency, or Danielle's, is that we have to be flexible enough where it's like, okay, so if that's what the client wants, great. But we got to understand that more and more people are going to have a different expectation. They're going to expect, if they're going to work with a lot of agencies in the future, that they're going to wind up with a block theme, full site editing. All right. Until next time, hope you found that interesting.